Welcome to the Gaslight Effect Podcast. I'm Robin Stern, co-founder and associate director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and author of the best-selling book, The Gaslight Effect. I'm an educator and a psychoanalyst, but first and foremost, I'm a wife, a mother, a sister, aunt, and healer. And just like many of you, I was a victim of gaslighting. Please join me for each episode as I interview fascinating guests and explore the concept of gaslighting. You'll learn what it truly means to be gaslighted, how it feels, how to recognize it, and how to understand it, and ultimately, how to get out of it. Before we begin, I want you to know that talking about gaslighting can bring up challenging and painful emotions. Give yourself permission to feel them. Some of you may want to go more deeply with your emotions, while some of you may hold them more lightly. No matter what you're feeling, know that your emotions are a guide to your inner life. Your emotions are sacred and uniquely you. Respect and embrace them, for they have information to give you. If you want to listen to other episodes of the Gaslight Effect podcast, you can find them at robinstern.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for being here with me. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Gaslight Effect podcast. I'm really excited today to have with me Amy Polacko, who is the co-author with my colleague and friend, Christina Crocchiola, of Framed. And for those of you who don't know, Amy, can you say a word about the book, and then I'll take it back and finish introducing you?
Sure. So Dr. Crocchiola and I put this together. It's the stories of 22 women from around the world, the UK, Canada, Australia, and the United States, obviously. And we have women's stories. We have academic research and notes. We have a foreword from Dr. Ramani and an epilogue from Tina Swithin of One Mom's Battle. But we called it Framed, Women in the Family Court Underworld. And, at the bottom, I think it says it all. Know the abuser's playbook.
Yes. Thank you for that important piece of work. Really, it's wonderful that you wrote that. It's such a gift to so many women who are struggling and don't know what's going on. So thank you for that. And you are also a divorce coach. So can you tell us more about yourself and how you got into this work, how you met Christine, Dr. Crocchiola, and what drew you to write a book and now to appear here on the Gaslight podcast?
Well, my heart has led me to this work, really. I've been divorced not once, but twice. So I am very familiar with the family court system, made a lot of mistakes, though, because I wasn't educated. I didn't know anything about it, like so many women. And I write this in the book. I was a babe in the woods. And so what I learned along the way really changed me. And I thought, women don't have someone to decipher this for them. They're rushing out and hiring an attorney and not understanding how the process works, how they should hire the right attorney. And I knew I would have done things differently if I had had a coach. So I started with just support group meetings in my living room. I live in Ridgefield, Connecticut. I thought I would be the only divorced woman in my town. And of course, I learned that wasn't true, that there were other women. And I thought women really need this. I saw women supporting other women, and I started coaching. I got my coaching certification, and I've been doing it ever since. I have clients across the country, and I'm also a journalist. That was my former life. So I have continued on a freelance basis to write for outlets like HuffPost, Ms., New York Daily News, and Newsweek about divorce, family court, singlehood. And yes, I've brought in gaslighting a lot, your expertise topic.
Thank you. Well, that is really important information for everyone listening. So don't be surprised if your email is flooded when we hang up the phone. When we get off this podcast. So we had talked a few minutes ago, actually, about getting right into a topic that I think would be very interesting to many women, and that has to do with how gaslighting can actually keep someone in a coercive marriage. So why don't we start there? Tell us.
Absolutely. And I love your book, first of all. The way you describe gaslighting is so incredible and accurate. And I've recommended it to some of my clients. I was on with coaching clients today where we were talking about gaslighting. And I know all of your listeners know how pervasive it is in these abusive and coercive controlling relationships. But where I really see it in working with my clients is that it's utilized to try to keep them in the marriage. In that cycle of abuse, when a woman or a man for that matter says, I'm not happy, I want to leave, it's not an easy exit. Then the love bombing can start again and the gaslighting can start again. So I would love to go through a few of the things I hear my clients being gaslighted with, okay?
Please,
Um,
that'll be so helpful for people listening.
right. So one of the major ones is you'll never make it without me, right? That instills fear of financial ruin or failure, and women are told you'll never be able to survive. You'll be living in a cardboard box, you'll be eating cat food and all of these things. And when women come to me, I just met with a woman about an hour or two ago who was in tears because she wants to leave her marriage, but she's so scared because she's being told this over and over again. And if you are a stay-at-home mom, for example, and you haven't been earning your own income, this is especially terrifying, right?
Well, often the gaslighter will, or the person doing the gaslighting will hook on to something that they can look at in real life so that it's not just what they're conjuring in their mind and say, see, this happened last month. See, look at your paycheck. Not just, I think this, but this is what's real.
Exactly. And I see so much financial abuse, right, with my clients. And oftentimes the woman is taking on all the household things and the children and could be working or not. But a lot of times the husband is handling the finances. So he's gaslighting her and saying, you're not good at money, right? You can't do this.
I have to
Oh,
do this, right? If I
right.
didn't do this, what would happen to us?
Right. So trying to convince her that if she left, she would not even be able to balance a budget or a checkbook or pay her bills correctly or survive, right?
So, how did you? Let me take you back out of the case study for the moment, just to think together and let our audience know what drew you to coercive control in particular, to really take that banner up, if you will, rather than just bullying or being mean or even traveling to gaslighting. I mean, what was it about coercive control that captured your interest and your intellect and your soul?
I think, well, I experienced it myself in past relationships. And I think, as you know, that there's this myth that only weak women or men fall for this, and that's not true. I know so many, as you do, educated people who have been duped. I'm a former investigative reporter. That was my former life on TV. So I was that annoying person chasing someone down with a microphone, uncovering corruption and crime. And if I could fall for someone like this, anyone can. And I just want to validate for women that they're not crazy, that this is insidious, right? It's hard to spot at first. And I remember it was actually a relative of mine I was on the phone with. I was very upset in a crisis situation and they said, "You have to get out of there before you really go crazy." And I I over time learned so many other women's stories just like mine. And so I think, as you know, and through Dr. Cocciola's work too, we're getting that word, that term out there more, right? And we need to educate legal professionals in it more.
It is fascinating, though, and I love the way you said that you knew all these strong women, that you considered yourself one of them, and I did too, when I was writing Gaslighting, and had many friends who were really powerhouses in their careers and certainly in other places in their life, except for this one relationship. And I'm really fascinated by the that moment in time where you are hearing something, it doesn't feel right. you know there's something going on, but you click into something being wrong with you or being afraid rather than saying, that guy, he's just not good for me and I'm out of here. And so what do you think about that moment, that place where you pivot to blame yourself or you agree with in the gaslighter and blame yourself?
So how does it happen? I think for everyone, it's a different journey, right? I was having this conversation with a client this morning who her divorce was finalized, but she still harbors anger and a little bit of self-blame that how did I not see this, right? And I do share with my clients some of my personal stories because they come to me because they know I've lived it, right? And I think, for her, we're trying to replace those feelings of sadness with anger and relief that she's escaped. And I say, you're not 95, you may be 60, you have a whole life in front of you. So I think everyone has that moment where the switch flips. I have women who come to me and start the divorce coaching journey and then go back, right? And I went back. So I can certainly empathize with that because I think manipulators are very good at pulling you back in. So I think for everyone, it's a little different. Sometimes it's someone finds that irrefutable evidence that you cannot explain away anymore, whether it's infidelity or financial infidelity, right? Catching someone in a lie, catching them red-handed. Not everyone has a smoking gun tape from a private investigator of a rendezvous at a hotel. That's not what I'm talking about. But, there is that time when I think the victim thinks and realizes this person doesn't care about me at all. It's devastating, but it's almost liberating when you finally have that radical acceptance.
I was thinking as you were talking about when you said irrefutable evidence, that many times gaslighters will use what they call irrefutable evidence. Like, for example, in one of the cases that I worked with this woman for quite some time, and I've told the story a lot in the Gaslight Effect podcast or other series of other episodes where couple walking down the street and he's telling her that they'll stop fighting, which they always were doing, when she stopped flirting with people who were saying hello to her and she didn't think she was flirting. And he said, you are flirting, you're being so friendly, and they think you're flirting, and so just look down at the street. And so I'll cut to the chase of this moment and say his irrefutable evidence was once she started looking down at the street, they stopped fighting. And so she got stuck in that moment of, but he's right. He's wrong. So there must be something wrong with me, rather than just pulling back to begin with and thinking, even if he was right, which he wasn't right in that situation, the way somebody makes you feel when you're having an argument, your feelings that there's something wrong with you and that person insisting that there is, that's what you need to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And I'm sure in your work as a therapist and my work as a coach, after or even still during the divorce, I'm telling my clients, we've got to rebuild that muscle. It's like going to the gym of trusting yourself again. Because I looked back and thought, okay, you have an Ivy League degree, you were an investigative reporter. Why were you believing him when he said you were too sensitive and right? And you've got to have confidence in yourself so that whether it's a friendship situation or a work colleague or a romantic date or something, that you stand firm and you knowing that was not okay with me, or that's a boundary, or that was wrong, right?
Or even if I am sensitive, that doesn't let you off the hook for what you just did to me.
Right, right.
So how did you do that for yourself? How did you reclaim your reality? How did you reclaim how did you begin to trust again?
Bit by bit. And I was just telling this client this morning that you have two options. You can start thinking, right, that everyone in the world is evil and everyone's out to get you and not, have many relationships and kind of shut down. Or you can say to yourself, okay, I need to accept that there are manipulators out there, but I have to be proud of my empathic qualities. I just need to get better at, spotting with the red flags, spotting the gaslighter. And so I went through that myself, and it took time. I definitely went through a period of where I thought everyone was, evil. And I often point to all these books behind me, which are so validating, right? But if you immerse yourself in that world, which is very important in reading your book and people like Dr. Ramani, right? But then you have to go out in the world and still function, right? So I think it takes time. I do see many women, especially, this is another topic, getting into what's going on in our world today, saying, you know what, I'm happy myself, and I want to protect my peace, and I don't necessarily need a partner.
Yeah. And do you think those women who have had the courage to liberate themselves from coercive, controlling relationships are actually being followed by the ghost of gaslighting, if you will? Like, are they followed by that? Is there something that follows you that doesn't allow you to trust as quickly? I mean, it would make sense, right? What you're saying makes total sense, that it does take time. And I wonder if that in and of itself is really hard for people, just to know that it's going to take time, that there is, well, I think it's a ghost of gaslighting.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And I think you can imagine someone going out there into the dating world again, right? And you're wondering, am I overreacting to this? Is this person gaslighting me or not? It takes a while to get your rudder back in check, you have that like gaslighting decoder, and sometimes you're questioning yourself, am I overreacting? Am I underreacting? Until you find yourself again. And that doesn't happen overnight. I think there is a definite healing process after these coercive control relationships. You don't just snap your fingers and read one book and you're healed. You have to have those real life instances where you're putting it into action.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's so confusing for so many, because all those good feelings that led you to trust your first relationship, or your last relationship rather, where you were abused, where you were controlled, are similar to the feelings that you might be having right then and there. And so how do you trust in those feelings again? How do you trust that they'll lead you somewhere good? So I want to take us back now to the courts. Right.
Hmm.
You use the term, it's an abuser's playground.
Hmm.
Tell us, can you unpack that a little bit, and why, and what you think of the gender bias in courts, and just talk a little bit about that world. I don't want people to miss out on the opportunity of being with you here and not hear what you wrote and thought about.
Sure. And it's something, obviously, Dr. Cocciola and I both feel passionately about. We became friends. We heard these stories and witnessed these stories with our clients all the time, and felt compelled to write Framed. So it's also something I've written about as a journalist. I've written for Ms. Magazine and HuffPost, sharing my personal story, but also a look at the court system. One article in particular pops out at me from Ms., where I talked about the hysterical woman out for revenge, misogynistic trope in our court system. And we use the image of Glenn Close in A Fatal Attraction, right? Because, who better than her? And I think that many women are portrayed that way. So we're up against that stereotype from the very outset. And that's one of the reasons I feel so passionately about divorce coaching is I can't have a woman go into family court and not realize that that's what she's up against, and she inadvertently does or says something that is completely misconstrued in a heartbeat. And it's so difficult to change that narrative. And, as for the abuser's playbook, it basically means that they have a plan. Every one of these stories, we have women from different countries, different walks of life, different backgrounds. The common thread in all of them is their partners use those same tricks from their toolbox. They oftentimes filed an ex parte motion, which is an emergency motion for custody or for something else, and posited a narrative in the family court arena first to say, she's crazy. I'm the normal one. She's nuts. Gaslighting, right? Right.
So interesting. So is this, you talked about parental alienation as well. Is this part of that they upfront prime the court to see that that's needed, that they need to separate, that, what are the legal terms?
It is an ex parte order, which is like an emergency order, like the children are in danger. I must have custody. And I think it goes hand in hand with, the weaponization of mental health. I mean, so many people have anxiety or take medication for something these days, right? But oftentimes it is twisted and there's a double standard. If a man perhaps takes it, it's not that big a deal. But if she does, she's an unstable mother, she's unhinged. And the ultimate irony is that oftentimes these women have been stay-at-home parents and the primary caregiver for the children. And lately I've had many women who actually have been homeschooling their children. And so they've been home with the kids a lot, but suddenly when the divorce happens, their spouse says they're unfit to be with the children. Now, they were the trusted educator, caregiver, handling doctor's appointments and everything else.
And that same husband wanted that to happen, right? He was a part of that decision for her to stay home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's part of the playbook, the constant litigation abuse of filing things over and over, trying to break down your spouse financially, emotionally, and physically. I don't need to tell you the effects of trauma on a body. And many people just give up. I remember, in my divorce, just thinking, all right, I just want to end this. And that's where you can't, because you end up agreeing to things that are in agreement for the rest of your life that affect you and your children, for example.
For those of us who are not familiar with family court, but are definitely familiar with being worn down by the persistent and consistent abuse and control, what is the process in family court? You said that there are all these different filings. What does that mean, actually?
Well, I mean, there are different ways to get divorced. Of course, there's mediation, which is a more amicable process. Don't recommend that with a coercive control or narcissistic abuser. Obviously, there's collaborative divorce where there's more of a team. There's usually a mental health professional and a financial person and 2 attorneys, but they're signing an agreement not to go to court. Litigation, has this term of like, it's war of the roses. It's not always that way, of course. We're talking about the worst of the worst cases because only 5% end up in a hearing in that dramatic scene we see on TV.
Is there a special way that you need to proceed when you have children? I mean, I've been divorced, so I'm asking a question that I already know my own personal story, that we're not required to go to court.
No.
So where does a court come in when you're talking about being with this coercive controller and all these different filings?
Well, you have to have a divorce decree ultimately, and whether it's through mediation, collaborative divorce, or through litigation, which ends up really being negotiated between 2 attorneys. And, I caution against a do-it-yourself divorce. Some of these manipulators are very good at gaslighting you into, oh, honey, let's save money. Let's just sit down here at the kitchen table and do it ourselves. They don't want you to be represented. They don't want you to know your rights. You end up agreeing to things because you're not educated. So you definitely need to go through the court system in some shape or form. Where the abuser's playbook comes in is they turn a litigation process into lawfare, where another tactic is delay, delay, delay. So, after a divorce is filed, the next thing that happens is both sides have to compare and swap financial statements, right? In Connecticut, we call it financial affidavit, but it's in every state. And the abuser will often delay, not give information, or ultimately months later, a year later, give a little drib or drab, but not the full picture, right? So that's stonewalling and gaslighting in itself, right? So that drags out the process. It has huge ramifications for the other spouse, who usually just wants to move on with their lives. So each divorce is different, but some of them have so many filings of the abusive partner going on the offense that you can see it. I mean, the Jennifer Dulos case that many people know in Connecticut had over 400 court filings. And it wasn't resolved at the time of her death.
And so the result of the court filings is this kind of trying to beat down the woman into just stopping. Are there people who, in the middle of the court process, go back to their husbands? Is that part of the tactic sometimes where you begin a process and the gaslighting is you see?
Yes. And one of the stories in our book, it was one of my clients actually, and she's a top executive somewhere and, had an abusive husband who even had her arrested and convinced the police that she was attacking him. And she says in the story in here that he was launching this war against her, but at the same time said, if you come back and this all goes away, we can be happy. Right. So yeah, it's the lack of control, right? They've lost control of you then, and they will do anything to get you. So, back to my list of how they gaslight you to keep you in a marriage, one of the main things is you're never going to see your kids again, because they know for us as women, that is our Achilles heel. Though I was speaking with a client this morning, actually, who her divorce is finalized and they didn't have kids. In the 11th hour, he tried to go after their pets. And I said to her, because the Achilles heel is kids, and since you don't have children together, he's trying to go after the pets, right? Anything to kind of bring you to your knees, right?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I was just going to ask you, given that you ask women to document things and to keep your events or your happenings with your spouse in a place where you can access them, right? What do you see? What are the tactics that women, or the strategies that women can use to counter some of the things they're seeing? And what are some of the things they're seeing?
Well, I think the first thing they can do is be proactive and start working with someone like me, a strategist, in advance, in silence. I always say to clients, even if they come to me for a free 15-minute consultation, which I offer, I say, I hope I work with you. I would love to help you. But even if I never see you again, please take this to heart. Do not go home and show your cards and say, I want a divorce, because that can be the gasoline, that could be the spark, right, that ignites the whole inferno. Because oftentimes these vengeful types will go out and double down and hire an attorney and go on the offensive and start that. Now, if you have your ducks in a row and you are methodically planning, you're gathering evidence, you're educating yourself, that's huge because you feel more in power, and you have your team set up. When you ultimately say, I want out of this marriage, and they see that you had the wherewithal to get representation and you know what you're talking about, I often think that the abuser looks at them like, wow, there's a new sheriff in town. Like, I'm used to just rolling right over you. So I think, I have clients who say, is it the end of the world if I don't file first? I like to have my clients file first. I think it is psychological for the abuser to see, I'm not scared of you. I have people to help me now. And you can't get away with what you've been doing before, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of empowerment in that. You can't get away with what you've been doing before. I put up with it, but I'm done now.
Right.
So it's interesting that you're asking people, and important that you're asking people to collect evidence, not to prove the coercive control, because you were done with that. You're collecting evidence so that you can break free.
Yes. Yes.
And what is that part of your Divorce Decoded course? Can you tell us about that course?
Yes, that was a labor of love. It is a full course with videos and downloads, because I thought to myself, I was so ill prepared. There was nothing out there to educate me. I walked into family court. I had no idea what was going on. And so it really is a primer for women. This is what you need to know. Here are the different processes. I even talk about what happens in family court, what to wear, what not to say, what not to do, the realities of our system right now. Most
What do you
women,
mean what to wear and what to say?
yes, good
Give us
question.
an example. Give us an example.
Good question. Well, I'll give you an example that years ago I made a big mistake and kind of dressed up. It wasn't like to the nines, but I looked professional and I was in mediation and had the mediator say, "Well, Amy, you can earn a lot more. I mean, look at you, and you have a master's from Columbia and da, da." And I thought she's just sizing me up. And meanwhile, I had a toddler who had developmental delays. I'm taking him to I said, well, I need a flexible schedule. I'm earning a full-time income, but you're telling me I'm underemployed, right? Which they love to do this to women. So I made a video kind of funny once for social media, and I tell my clients and I talk in this course about it. I want you to look frumpy, like no jewelry, no designer bags, because let's remember that judges and mediators and attorneys are human, and they're still sizing somebody up in 2 seconds flat. And if you're walking in with a Louis Vuitton bag and you have a big diamond ring, they're going to assume, and judges really hate that idea that you want to, keep a certain lifestyle and think you don't have to work. Because I had an attorney explain to me once, some of these judges have been working full time and have kids, and they think, why should you be any different?
Yeah. Exactly. Why can't you go out and hit the streets and do
right? So, for example, I'm wearing this leopard print top. I would never wear this to family court. Too much.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. So, given what you just said, it sounds really great, by the way. Where can people take that course?
They can go to my website, which is freedomwarrior.info. And the course is $397. And I say to people, it's less than 1 hour with an attorney. And you are going to feel so educated and empowered. And I do I meet with a lot of women who aren't quite ready to take the step for divorce, but they feel so powerless and often abused. And this is a way, whether they do it in their car, on their phone, or they go to the library or a friend's house, that they can watch a little module and feel like, I'm building this muscle. Okay, I'm feeling better. Okay, now I know this. Now I know how custody works. Now I know how we divide credit card debt. Now I know how we handle the house. Now I know this, so that little by little, they're educating themselves. So ultimately, I have a list of questions to ask attorneys. They're hiring the right professionals. A lot of times I see this in Facebook groups all the time. Women have something egregious happen in a marriage, and then they post, I need a shark attorney for a divorce, and everybody gives them names, and they go and rush out into a process without knowing if that's the right person, knowing how to ask questions or anything.
What would you say are the top 3 things a woman should look for if they're looking for an attorney?
Well, my number one thing, and I only recommend to my clients, attorneys who I know did right by a woman who is in a similar situation. So they have to understand coercive control, right? I mean, you can't have an attorney who just pays it lip service. I hired a wrong attorney years ago. He told me, I know narcissists. I've been, trying cases against them for years. He did not. It became very clear that he didn't. I was explaining to him the behavior and the dynamics. So I think that's really, really important. Two, it has to be the right process for you. You're not going to hire a bulldog if you want mediation, and vice versa. And, three, I think it's someone who's not afraid to go up against this divorce industrial complex that Dr. Ramani talks about in the introduction to our book, Framed. If someone is more concerned about hanging out at the country club with the judge and the attorneys and has a reputation for not really pushing for their client, they're not the person for you. They could have the best website in the world, but you don't want them, because I have coached many, many women through changing attorneys because that person was not going to bat for them at all, not even returning calls in some cases.
Yeah. Do you recommend that women who are thinking about leaving come to you even if they don't eventually leave?
Yes. And I just had a conversation with a woman today about that. if you go back and work on your marriage and it works out, I'm thrilled. I'm never pushing anyone toward divorce. My experience is that most of the time they come back to me, right? I think often, and I did it myself, we bargain, we say, maybe I can just deal with it. Maybe it'll get better. He says he's going to get help or whatever that is. But you're not going to hurt yourself by getting some ducks in a row and educating yourself, even if you never use it. But in my experience, most women do end up, even if it's 6 months or a year later.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. And that goes back to what you were saying, that they're learning along the way. So they're feeling empowered. No matter what, they're going to get that same education, whether they stay or they go.
Well, I think, right. I think another way that abusers gaslight is they say things like, all marriages have problems. No marriages are perfect, right? As if another way of devaluing your
Right.
feelings.
Experience, of course.
Right.
So with all the challenges that you've seen and heard through your time with these uh, women talking about unimaginable circumstances or imaginable circumstances of pain and coercive control, what would you say had the most transforming power for these women in terms of helping them leave and thrive?
I think realizing that they're not alone, because I think one of the things that gaslighters are so adept at doing is convincing you that you're crazy and there's something wrong with you. And when they connect with other women and hear stories and get that validation from a coach, from other women, I have a free support group on Facebook where I have women who are thinking about divorce. Some of them are just watching things going on. Others are in it, and others are 5, 10 years out. And I think it's wonderful that they feel this compulsion to reach back and extend a hand to these other women and help them and give them advice. So I think once you see, okay, other people are dealing with this, other people have escaped, it really builds their strength and resolve. And I always say, I've never had a woman say she regrets her divorce. I have heard many say, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, right.
Yeah. So I have found also that the social support is key. And even in the 1944 movie Gaslight, she finds that she wakes up to gaslighting and relies on the support of that neighbor. You see the movie,
Yes,
I
yes.
can tell by your response. And it is that third person who lets her know, I'm here and I see what you see and you've known it all along. And she realizes, of course, that's her truth. Like she has to do something at that point. But it is the social support in just a few seconds in the movie and perhaps over time in real life, but so key in those very difficult times where hopefully people can find compassion and patience for themselves as they're moving through it. Because I say all the time to people, you really need that. You need to give yourself permission to give something up, to have your feelings, whatever they are, and just permission to have a loss in your life and a gap in your life for a while.
Exactly. And I think, we hear about a lot of the negatives of social media these days, but one of the benefits is that there is that sense of community where you see someone does a video and it feels like they're speaking to you, and, a quote just sums up your situation. And I think, I'm not alone. So that has increased over these past several years, right? Where people are calling out this kind of behavior in a really public way. Whereas before it was, not talked about as much, or men will be men, and or woman could be a woman, of course. But so I think that helps people a lot.
And just a final question before I ask you to share with people where they can find you again. What do you think is the most urgent reform needed in the courts?
Well, I think that our courts can benefit greatly from Caden's law, which is a law that was passed on the national level. And one of the stories in our books, the only woman who was able to use her real name, Kathy Sherlock, her daughter, Caden Mancuso, was murdered by her abusive father after her mom had begged for the courts to not allow that to happen. So it's been passed in a handful of states, but it really will protect children in many ways by limiting the use of these reunification camps, by restricting testimony to experts and including education for legal professionals and judges. And so I think that's really important. I was speaking this week to the National Association of Divorce Professionals, and people were, couldn't believe some of these stories. And they said, how come no one's doing anything? And I said, no, the National Safe Parents Organization is. So if you're not following them or supporting them or they just had a webinar yesterday, and they're at the front lines trying to pass this legislation. We have a whole call to action in the back of our book, Framed. So we hope that by the time you get to the end of the book, you are so enraged and that you're motivated to join us and help.
I think that's a wonderful way to end your book, and it's a wonderful way to end our conversation for now.
Yes.
Tell the audience where they can find you.
Sure. So on Instagram, I am at Freedom Warrior Tribe. My coaching practice is called Freedom Warrior for a reason that I think you can guess at this point. My website is freedomwarrior.info, and I do free 15-minute coaching consultations. I also have like a 1-hour session. Some people want to start with 1 hour. I have different coaching packages. I have a proactive playbook for divorce, which is just $37. And it's a bunch of spreadsheets that walk you through budgeting. What financial documents should I gather? What are my co-parenting expenses going to look like? Again, that was something I didn't have and think women especially need. And then I have my Divorce Decoded course that you mentioned, and you can get that at a discount when you get the playbook, and you can kind of educate yourself on your own terms in privacy. One of the big things for women is not being detected while they're exploring this.
Well, that's really wonderful. And before we end, what are you most excited about professionally? What's coming next for you, aside from everything you've spoken about, which I'm sure keeps you very busy, and obviously you're passionate and it's very compelling and urgent. So is there something in particular happening next year, or an event you're looking forward to?
Well, I am going to launch my own podcast in the new year. So this is long overdue as a former broadcaster, right? We've been a little busy with the book and being on podcasts, but I really want to provide some hope for women too. I think that we talk a lot about these stories, which is really important, but I want to highlight those who have gotten out and how they've done it and what they're doing now. Now more than ever, we see women's rights under attack. And I think that let's inspire each other. Let's show each other, how do you start a business post-divorce? How do I regroup financially, emotionally, whatever it is? I think we can help each other so much. So I'm excited about that.
Well, lots of luck with that. I think that's really important. Obviously leaving people on a positive note and equipping them with things they need to feel empowered. It's just what people need to hear. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for your time today. I've so enjoyed our connection and meeting you and hearing about your important work. And I know it's been very meaningful and important for all of our listeners. So thank you very much, Amy, for being with me.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do in this field. You've helped so many. So I appreciate it. It was an honor to be on.
Thank you. And to everyone listening, I'll see you next time on the Gaslight Effect Podcast. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining me for today's episode. I hope you found it helpful and meaningful. If you want to listen to other episodes of the Gaslight Effect Podcast, you can find them at robinstern.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please leave a rating and a review. I also invite you to follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm so grateful to have many people supporting me, and especially grateful for all of you, my listeners.